Brooke panicked. "Shall we dissolve our marriage? What do you mean we will dissolve our marriage?" she screamed. "I mean, when you walk out that door, we won't be married anymore. You will no longer be my wife, and I will no longer be your husband. We will remove the rings and renounce our alliance right here and now. We'll deal with the formalities later. But as far as I understand, our marriage will be over before you walk out the door." And before Brooke could say anything, Frank quickly added, "And tonight, when Lavalier takes you, I won't be a cuckold because you won't be my wife," Frank said. Suddenly, Brooke became hysterical. "No! No! 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 I won't do this, Frank! I won't do this!" Brooke screamed. "No? Well, we've agreed, Brooke. So what do you want?" he asked. "I don't know," she said tiredly. "Nonsense, of course you know what you want. You want to sit on 2 chairs. You want to spend the night in Marc Lavaliere's bed and then come home to me," Frank told her. Brooke cried uncontrollably. "You're really serious? You're serious, aren't you? If I go out with Marc for even one night, will you divorce me?" "Yes," he said completely seriously. Brooke's mood suddenly changed from panicked to angry as she saw her reasoning for spending the night with Marc crumble right before her eyes. "Frank, do my feelings and emotions really mean so little to you that you will simply automatically dissolve our marriage because of this and not even give us a chance to sort it out and move on together?" she asked. "Brooke, there's nothing to deal with here. Look, understand. There are some things in life that are non-negotiable, and my wife having sex with another man is one of them. I won't agree to a deal where you have sex with Cavalier and then you come home and we just carry on with our lives as if it's no big deal. So my feelings, emotions, and needs don't mean anything to you," she said sarcastically. "Brooke, just a few minutes ago you walked away and abandoned me, basically threw me aside, and without any explanation. If I hadn't caught up and stopped you, you'd now be in Marc Lavaliere's car, driving to his house for a night of sex. So obviously my feelings and emotions don't mean much to you. So why should your feelings and emotions mean anything to me?" he asked her. The reality of her decision finally hit Brooke. "Oh my God, Frank, I am so sorry. I just didn't think," she exclaimed. "Damn it, Brooke. Don't say you didn't think because you did. But all I was thinking about was getting naked for Lavaliere and all the sexy things he was going to do to you." Brookie started crying again. "And you certainly didn't think about me and that I was interested in why you left, where you went, and what you would do," he told her. "Oh God, Frank, please believe me, I didn't mean to leave you without letting you know where I went. When I got to Marc's house, I was going to write to you and explain where I am and what I'm doing." "Write to me? Write?" Frank asked with a laugh. "Are you saying that being in bed and having sex with Lavaliere, were you going to write to me?" Frank laughed. "And what were you going to write?" "Frank, I'm sorry I left the party, but I went to Marc Lavaliere's house. Today he and I will have sex, so I don't want to be at home. Good night and see you tomorrow," Frank told her sarcastically. "This is cruel," Brooke said. "Cruel? Brooke, it's cruel and shocking that you made a split-second decision to leave me, your husband, your best friend, and your soulmate to spend the night with a man you just met," Frank told her. Brooke cried. "And what's really cruel is that you expected me to put up with it. As if this is no big deal." "That's cruel, Brooke," Frank exclaimed. "I'm so sorry, Frank. Sorry. I just didn't think," she said. "Well, Brooke, it doesn't matter now what you thought or didn't think. And it doesn't matter what you write or don't write, because I caught up with you before you walked out the door, and now I know your intentions. And now you know my intentions. None of us need to guess anymore. Now we just need to get to the point." Brooke looked at Frank with a questioning expression on her face. "And what is this? What is the essence of the matter?" she asked. "Brooke, the point is this. Here's the door, and Lavaliere is waiting for you outside. I imagine he's starting to lose patience. This is your decision," Frank firmly told his wife of 12 years. Brooke didn't hesitate for a second. "Frank, I'm not going out that door. I'm not going to leave you for him. I'm not going to give up our life together for his sake." "I'm not that stupid," Brooke told him. Frank studied her. "Well, 15 minutes ago you were determined to walk out that door and go with him, So what has changed, or has anything changed other than the fact that you don't want to get a divorce? Frank asked. Well, I mean, can I believe that your frantic desire to have sex with Lavalier has suddenly disappeared? Or are you going to wait until next week when I'm in Europe and then sleep with him? No! Why do you think so? Brooke screamed. Are you going to cheat on me behind my back? He asked. No, no, no! I never cheated on you. I would never cheat on you. I love you, she shouted. Well, just tonight, you were going to cheat on me. If I hadn't stopped you, you would have cheated on me right now. For the second time in just a few minutes, reality hit Brooke right between the eyes, and she found herself face to face with what she had decided to do to Mark. Oh my God, no, no, no! What was I thinking? She shouted. So, what happened? He asked. Don't know. I don't know, Frank. I'm so confused. I don't know what came over me that I decided that I could go with Mark and it wouldn't be a sin and you wouldn't mind, she said. Frank listened to her, but she saw that he had a skeptical expression on his face. She had to tell him all this. Honestly, Frank, I don't know what came over me. It all started from the moment Mark came up to our table and asked me to dance. Pulling me onto the dance floor, he attacked me so quickly and so boldly. He constantly told me how much he wanted me and how much I would enjoy sex with him. Then he started hugging me tightly, then he started kissing me, then he started feeling me up. And Frank, I didn't stop him, Didn't stop him, she said, crying. So you encouraged him? Frank said. Yes, I encouraged him. I'm so sorry, Frank, she cried. Then I convinced myself that going with him was the right thing to do. And then I convinced myself that you would understand and wouldn't mind if I went with him. All I can say is that I realize I really messed up and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, she cried. Frank listened to Brooke and at the same time thought about the note the waiter gave him. Frank reached into his pocket and pulled it out. Here, read this, he said. Brooke took the note, read it, and then looked at Frank. Where did you get it? Is she real? The waiter slipped it to me during dinner, he told her. Is this just a game he plays? Asked Brooke. That's what it says here. Brooke was incredulous after reading the note. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it, she said. Brooke, can you believe it? He picked you out of the crowd and actually seduced you. He manipulated you and fooled you, Frank said. Brooke continued to read the note over and over again. What he did to me was just a game. Yes. Is everything he told me just a game? Yes, Brooke. It's just a game he plays. Brooke was destroyed. It began to dawn on her that she was simply the prize for this week's game. A female trophy specimen to satisfy Lavalier's sexual appetite for married women. Last week, it could have been a woman named Debbie. The next one is a woman named Sandy. But this week, it's Brooke. It was she who took the bait and fell for Mark's game. And she felt a sickening feeling as she realized that she had put her marriage at risk. Frank, I'm sick, she said, turned and ran away from him to the toilet. She vomited several times and then went to the sink to wash her hands and face. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw that she was in complete disarray, just like this whole damn evening. Brooke came out of the restroom and saw Frank still standing in front of the exit. She rushed to him and hugged him. Oh God, Frank, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Forgive me for being so stupid and gullible, she asked through tears. Frank looked at her and then said, Brooke, Lavalier took you by surprise. Then he seduced you to the point where you believed you could have sex with him and there would be no consequences. That I wouldn't mind if you had a one-night stand with him. But now you have found out the opposite. Now you know. So promise us that we will never be in this situation again. On his way to the door, Frank noticed that two of Lavalier's teammates were still sitting. They watched him and Brooke. Brooke, wait here. I need to talk to Lavalier's friends. Frank, please give it up. We don't need any more trouble, Brooke told Frank. No, Brooke, I'm not going to leave this just like that. And with that, Frank left Brooke standing alone and walked over to Lavalier's teammates. Sir, We don't want any problems, one of his teammates said. Okay, then do what I tell you. Tell your buddy Lavaliere that he lost the game today. Tell him he is a loser. Tell him Frank Walker is going to spread the word around the world that Mark Lavaliere is a loser. Both of Lavaliere's teammates stared at Frank with stunned expressions. Sir, we can't tell him this. He'll kill us both. Gentlemen, do you want to deal with me or him? Frank asked them. Sir, we don't want any problems with you. Good choice. Now one of you will take the phone and tell him what I said. Do it now. And tell him that when I go out that door, it's better for him not to shine anywhere. One of the men picked up the phone, dialed Lavaliere's number, and told him what Frank had said. Frank couldn't hear the conversation, but he realized that Lavaliere was beside himself with anger because his friend told him not to do anything stupid. And then the call stopped. What did he say? Frank asked. He said he would kill you. Okay, Frank answered. Oh God, Frank, I promise you that after all this, I will never let a man near me again, she said. Frank looked at her for a moment and then said, okay, and when we go out like we did tonight, I'll try to help you keep that promise. I should have intervened before Lavaliere got you into this state, but I didn't do it. So this is my fault, just like yours. And it's also Lavaliere's fault, because he shouldn't have sought out and seduced married women. So, Brooke, I forgive you and myself, but I don't forgive Lavaliere, and I'll deal with him later. Oh God, Frank, thank you for your understanding. But Frank, please just forget Mark. We'll never see him again, and he's not worth the trouble you might face, she said. After this remark, Frank looked at Brooke and thought it was strange that she didn't want Mark to suffer any consequences. In the end, Lavaliere almost robbed Brooke of her marriage. Why wouldn't she want him to feel some discomfort for trapping her in his game? I'll think about it, he told her. Frank then asked, do you want to go back to the party? No, Frank, let's go home. Sure? Yes, please, let's just go home, Brooke exclaimed. Frank and Brooke walked back down the hallway and entered the restaurant. And with that, Frank left his two teammates, picked up Brooke, and they left the restaurant and the lounge. On the street, Frank gave the parking ticket to the valet, and then they, along with several other couples, waited for their car to be picked up. While they were waiting, an SUV roared up to them, braked in front of them, and the passenger side window rolled down. An angry Mark Lavaliere sat inside the SUV. Come on, Brooke, you said you wanted to come with me, so come on, get in the car, Mark shouted. She won't go with you, Lavaliere, Frank told him. I'm not talking to you, old man, Mark shouted back to Frank. Come on, Brooke, let's go. No, Mark, I can't go with you tonight, Brooke answered him. Brooke, come here and get in the car. Let's go now, Brooke shouted. Lavaliere, she won't go with you. You lost the game. You're a loser. Now get out of here, loser, and leave us alone, Frank told Mark. Being told he was a loser in front of a group of people who were most likely his fans instantly infuriated Mark. I'll show you who the loser is, you piece of shit, Mark shouted, getting out of his SUV. Frank asked the people waiting for their cars to move away because the situation could become dangerous. He then moved toward the front of the SUV on the driver's side, where he encountered Lavaliere brandishing a large semi-automatic handgun. Lavaliere was beside himself with rage. He lost Brooke, and now he's been publicly humiliated. Frank studied Lavaliere, and his behavior reminded him of a scene in the Masai Mara in Kenya when he watched a lion and hyenas fight over the lion's prey. Like that lion, Lavaliere stalked Brooke for hours and then took over her body, mind, and soul. She belonged to him, and he was going to take her to his house to devour her for his sexual pleasure. But before that happened, Frank intervened and snatched it from him. Now Lavaliere, like a lion, had only one thing on his mind: to get her back, and he did not care what he had to do to achieve this, even if it meant killing Frank Walker. Brooke will come with me, and if you try to stop her, I will kill you, Lavaliere shouted. Frank took a few steps back and was now standing no more than 3 meters from Mark. His arms were raised, palms up, and his fingers extended in a non-aggressive, non-escalatory, but self-defensive manner. Put the gun down, Frank said. Bullshit, old man. You ruin my game and I'll kill you. Put the gun down before you get into more trouble, Frank said in a calm, firm voice. I'll show you who's in trouble, old man. I'll kill you and then I'll fuck your wife, Mark shouted and pointed the gun in Frank's direction. Lavaliere was so engrossed in his ranting and rage that he didn't notice Frank lower his right hand and put it in his pants pocket. In this pocket, Frank carried a Sig Sauer micro-compact semi-automatic pistol. It was loaded with 8 rounds of 9mm critical defense ammunition. 1 cartridge is in the chamber, and 7 cartridges are in the magazine. Frank was licensed to carry a SIG pistol and regularly trained to use it in self-defense situations like the one he was in now. Frank hadn't had to shoot a person in years, but when he was in the military, he saw action and actually killed several people, both with a pistol and at close range. So now, faced with an armed and aggressive Marc Lavaliere, the memories of that experience came flooding back to him, and he instinctively knew how he needed to act in this life-threatening situation. Therefore, with his hand in his pocket, Frank decided that he would now end this confrontation. And he decided that he would shoot Lavaliere. His rage, death threats, gun pointing, and proximity to Frank created a situation that justified the decision to shoot to kill. Having made this decision, Frank quieted down Lavaliere's ranting and rage. He calmed down and controlled his breathing. He focused on what he had to do. Smoothly remove the pistol from his pocket, raise it to the firing position, aim at Lavaliere, and quickly fire 2 accurate shots. All movements of the pistol had to be precise, and the entire process had to be completed in less than 3 seconds. Otherwise, Lavaliere would likely return fire, and they would end up in a firefight, something Frank wanted to avoid. Focusing his gaze on Lavaliere, Frank pulled a pistol from his pocket. It was a smooth extraction, just what he needed, but just as he was raising the gun to the firing position, 3 quick shots rang out behind Frank to the right. At the same instant, Frank saw Lavaliere's body shake as the bullets hit him, and then he saw Lavaliere collapse to the ground. Having recovered from the unexpected shots, Frank thought, "What the hell?" And, turning around, saw that the shooter was still aiming his pistol at Mark's body lying on the ground. Frank quickly pulled himself together and addressed the shooter. "I think you did it. You can put the gun down," Frank said. "He was going to kill you," the shooter said, lowering the gun to her side. "Yes, that's what he said," Frank answered and asked, "Who are you?" "I'm an off-duty cop and I work security here," the shooter told him as they quickly approached Lavaliere. "Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you're here," Frank said. "Yes, I'm glad I'm here too," she said. Frank and the security officer knelt next to Lavaliere, who was alive and conscious, but groaning in pain from 3 gunshot wounds. "What's happened?" Mark moaned. "They shot at you." "Lie still," Frank told him. "Did they shoot me?" "Yes, you were shot," Frank said. "Who shot at me?" "I shot at you, Mark," the officer told him. Mark looked at the officer. "Marjorie?" "Yes, Mark," she said. "Oh my gosh, Marjorie, why did you shoot me?" Lavaliere asked breathlessly. "Because you were going to kill this man," Marjorie told him. Mark was breathing heavily and losing blood. "Oh God, I'm in so much pain, please help me." "I called the ambulance doctors. They're already on their way. Stay still and hold on," Marjorie told him. Lavaliere was breathing heavily. "I didn't mean to kill him. It's just a game," Mark said, catching air. "Pointing a gun and threatening a person is not a game," Marjorie told him. "Marjorie, you know this is a game," he told her in a weak voice. "Mark, how many times have I told you that your game will lead to you being killed?" she said in response. "I know, but it's just a game. It's just a game. I was just playing a game," he gasped. "Oh God, I'm so cold. Why am I so cold?" Then he looked at Frank and said, "Please, sir, I'm so thirsty. Please bring me some water." Frank turned and shouted to the audience to bring water for Lavaliere. Lavaliere was bleeding quickly, and Frank knew that even if the paramedics arrived right away, there was nothing they could do to save him because he had already lost too much blood. For a few more moments, Lavaliere continued to beg for help, but then fell silent. He was unconscious from loss of blood. Then, after a few more minutes, his breathing stopped. Frank checked for a pulse, checked again, but there was none. He was no longer there. Marc Lavaliere has died. It was already well after 11:30 at night when the police allowed Frank and Brooke to leave the restaurant and lounge. They and other witnesses to the confrontation and shooting were interviewed by police officers, detectives, special investigators, internal affairs officers, and even an assistant district attorney. Frank and Brooke testified about their contacts and involvement in Marc Lavaliere's affairs, and Frank issued a separate statement supporting the off-duty police officer's decision to shoot Lavaliere, and went on record saying she saved his life. But finally, after an evening that started with simply attending a birthday party and ended with them being involved in the murder of a local sports star, Frank and Brooke were returning home. They rode in silence for some time. Neither of them uttered a word. Finally, Brooke broke the silence. "Frank," she said. "Yes," he answered. "Are you disappointed that you didn't kill him?" she asked. Without a moment's hesitation, Frank answered, "Yes." Brooke thought about his answer and how his reaction was immediate and unconditional, and she heard the anger in his voice. Frank was denied satisfaction and was angry that the situation with Lavaliere ended with a female security officer committing the murder. When Marc confronted them in front of the restaurant, Brooke knew without a doubt that this was now Frank Walker's game, and she knew that, most likely, it would not end well for Marc. Lavaliere was a young star with a huge ego, a fiery temper, and a gun, whereas Frank Walker was a seasoned corporate operative who made his living by taking down powerful men and women, and he was furious that this grown man playing children's games had the audacity to try to steal his wife right in front of him, and Lavaliere could not escape the consequences. Brooke was well aware that Frank was armed and knew that he had deliberately lured Marc into a situation where he would most likely kill him. Telling Marc that he had lost the game and calling him a loser was nothing more than bait, and of course, Marc fell for it, which sealed his fate. So either way, Brooke knew Marc Lavaliere was a dead man before he even got out of his SUV. And, watching the confrontation between her potential lover and her husband, she was very upset because she was the one who caused Marc's death. If he had not chosen her, and if she had not agreed to go with him, he would still be alive. But for some strange reason, fate intervened and an off-duty officer shot and killed Lavaliere, innocently thinking he was saving Frank's life, but instead denying Frank the opportunity to make Lavaliere face punishment for trying to steal his wife. But she also saved Brooke from having to live with the knowledge that her husband killed Marc because of her. "Well, I'm glad you didn't kill him," she told him. "Why?" "Because it was better that the officer killed him." "Why?" Frank asked her. "Because we would be in trouble," she said. "You mean with the police?" "Yes, and with the media," she said. "Yes, if I had killed him, the police and the media would have tried to make a dirty story out of it, but it would have been a clear case of self-defense. He behaved inappropriately. He had a gun and pointed it at me. He threatened to kill me more than once, and he was only 3 meters away from me. So it would be a justifiable situation, self-defense, shoot to kill, whether the police and the media like it or not," he told her. "Yes, but the media would ask questions and analyze why you killed him and not wounded him," she answered. "Of course, it's their job to ask questions, make guesses and express critical opinions. But the fact is that he was armed with a deadly weapon and could have killed me even if he had been wounded. Therefore, for my own protection, self-defense, I would have no choice but to go for the stopping blow," he replied. "Oh," she said, thinking about what he had told her. "It will still be unpleasant in the media, even if I didn't kill him." "Some of the blame will be placed on me," Frank told her. "And they will put it on me," she said. "Yes, they will. So be prepared for the fact that they will come for us. Our lawyer will help up to a certain point, but only up to a certain point. You can be sure that the media will twist everything so that he was killed precisely because of you and me. There may be lawsuits and counterclaims, but don't worry, we can handle it. And we will emerge victorious. Because in the end, he seduced you, attacked us, and threatened me, so we are victims, Frank told her. Then he added, but remember, he was a football star and a local celebrity. And here in our beloved South, football stars are considered gods. So according to the media, he is not guilty of anything. So just understand that for the next few days, all we will see and hear in the media is that poor Mark Lavaliere is dead. It will be reported that he was dancing with a woman and her jealous husband created a situation that resulted in him being killed by a guard. But eventually, the real Mark Lavaliere story will come out and the media will calm down because they won't be interested in telling a story about a sports hero who has a hobby of picking up married women and taking them to his home for the night for sex. That's what I want. I want it all to just go away, she said. It will happen eventually, Frank said. They drove in silence for a few more minutes, and then Frank asked, are you disappointed that you didn't go and have a night of fabulous sex with him? Brooke was surprised and stunned by Frank's question. She glanced at him. How dare you ask such a thing? And began to say something, but then paused, thinking for a few moments about how to answer his question. Then, in an expressive voice, she said, no, dear, of course not. This was the lie Frank expected to hear. A simple no would have been sufficient and believable, but the long pause and the dear, combined with the of course not, were too serious and confirmed what he suspected, namely that she was thinking about the loss of her fairy tale experience and wanted to hide his disappointment from him. But the way she looked at him, her voice and her choice of words gave her away. But Frank was not surprised because he knew that Lavaliere had awakened in Brooke the idea that she was more than a wife, that she was a woman, and that it was her right to indulge in sex with a man who was not her husband. While they danced, Lavaliere talked to Brooke about sexual things that usually go unspoken, even between husband and wife. Brooke listened, and what he said sparked her imagination, and Lavaliere convinced her that the ideal way to experience these unspeakable things was with a partner with whom she could be completely free, open, and uninhibited, a partner with whom she has no emotional ties, a partner who knows the ways of debauchery and guides her in exploring the erotic side of her sexuality. So the seed of infidelity had been sown, and Frank knew it. He knew she was now open to sex with other men, although she had previously promised that she would never let a man near her again. It was just a workaround to get out of the situation she was in. When Frank stopped her from leaving with Lavaliere, he heard it in her voice and saw it in her actions. Her behavior screamed, I want to experience sex with another man. She just didn't want to pay for it today. But that's today. Knowing all this, Frank realized that he could never trust her again. And as they drove home, he wondered if he could live with his mistrust of her and accept the fact that one day she would have the opportunity to go with another man, and Brooke would most likely take advantage of this opportunity. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.